Hello, my name is Ryan, and I get to serve as one of the pastors at New Hope Church. And I want to thank you for taking your time today, whatever it is you might be doing, and listening in on this podcast. In this episode, I want to take on a topic that is incredibly practical for all of us. I want to talk about what the Bible teaches on the topic of work as ministry. In other words, how we treat our 9 to 5. You know, the Bible, as I mentioned before, has a lot to say about it. For example, did you know that over 120 of Jesus's public appearances in the Gospels, he's in a marketplace setting? This is where he spent time. We know many of Jesus's parables have a workplace context. I mean, Jesus himself was a carpenter, presumably for many years. And interesting enough, when Jesus looked to build a team, his 12 disciples, he didn't go to local seminaries, if you will. He rather found blue-collar workers and invited them to be a part of his work. The Bible even goes so far as to say in 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 10, that those that do not and will not work should not eat. Now, here's the thing. I know that those of you listening or watching this episode, we're not all in the same place. You know, we're in different life stages, whether early in life or later in life, or we're in our working years, or we work from home. We're just in different places and different settings. And that's perfectly okay. Everything we're going to talk about in this episode applies to all of us because all of us have a 9 to 5. In other words, we all do work. We do work in a variety of ways. And the principles in Scripture apply to all those types of settings. And so what I'd like to do today is I want to talk about what does God say about our work and share 3 different and important principles from the Bible. In all of them, what we're going to learn is that the Lord deeply cares about this part of our lives. So let's jump right in. Look at these 3 principles from Scripture pretty briefly. Here's the first one. Number 1 is that God is pleased when we give our best. In other words, each day the Lord wants us to bring our A game. A couple of verses that speak to this. Colossians chapter 3, verse 23, where it says, "Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for men." Or how about Galatians chapter 6, verses 9 and 10? "Let us not become weary of doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who belong to the family of believers." See, here's the thing. You may not be the best. You may not even feel the best. But in all things, we're to give God our best. Now, when it comes to the workplace, practically this means things like don't be the last to arrive and the first to leave, and procrastinate with long breaks, waste time with computer games, and just not being a good and hard worker. These are ways that this shows up. See, how you work is really a part of your testimony. It's what other people see about you. And it's also maximizing the skills and the opportunities that the Lord brings your way. And so that's our first principle there, that God is pleased when we give our best. Here's principle number 2 we see in Scripture, is that God is pleased when we view our work as ministry. Again, we view our work as ministry. So we need to understand that daily tasks do matter. Like the things we do in our lives, no matter how mundane, they matter. And as you go about your daily tasks, maybe that's teaching kids, changing diapers, building widgets at a workplace, and all these things, these tasks are opportunities to bring glory to the Lord. You see, the key is to view yourself in the workplace, or really any place, as Christ's servants. Now, in a workplace scenario, you likely have a boss. I mean, maybe you are the boss, but most people have a boss. But regardless, if you're working to serve the Lord, He is your first priority as a boss. He's the one you're looking to please. He's the one that you recognize ultimately you're serving Him. You're giving Him your best. And again, you're viewing it and you're doing it because you love Him, because you're His servant and you want to serve Him first and most. Now, some of you listening or watching this podcast, you're maybe either thinking or saying out loud, okay, Ryan, cute message so far, cute podcast, but you don't know where I work. Like, you don't know what I go through. You don't know who I have to work for in terms of my supervisor or my boss. Like, it's not exactly Mr. Rogers' neighborhood here. There's backstabbing, there's gossip, there's a toxic culture in my workplace. It's just hard. And like, how do I view that as ministry? Like, how do I move forward in that kind of a setting as ministry? Now, this is such an important topic and a good question too. And I think what's helpful, at least what I've found helpful, is to look at the life of Daniel. Daniel in the Bible just lays out some remarkable principles. I mean, consider his life. He was young, good looking, wealthy, articulate, intelligent. The guy had everything going for him in life until the day when the Babylonians showed up. King Nebuchadnezzar wiped out his city, wiped out his land, presumably split up or destroyed his family, and all of a sudden he's being carted off to Babylon. I mean, his life did a 180 completely. And then as he gets to Babylon, then he finds out that his life was about to change in the sense of now, ultimately, he's going to be recruited to work for the king that just wrecked his life. He went from being a somebody to a nobody, but how he responded to all that is remarkable. I just want to point out three very brief things. The first thing is that Daniel, in this difficult environment, he never compromised. He just stayed steadfast, committed to God, committed to integrity. Daniel chapter 1, verse 8. It says this, but Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine. And he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself in this way. This took guts. Like, this was a bold move by a young guy. But his thing was, I am going to live with integrity. I'm not going to compromise my convictions no matter what it costs me. And sometimes, and for us in the workplace to follow this example, we have to be willing to be different in order to honor God and to view our workplace as ministry. So he never compromised. The next thing we see, and this is through the bulk of the book of Daniel, but we see Daniel served King Nebuchadnezzar faithfully for about 40 years. And again, I want to call out, this was the guy that ruined his life. This was the guy, again, that split up his family, presumably, that destroyed his nation. But that's where God had him for that time. And so he was faithful to serve that king. Daniel stayed faithful in his role through lots of workplace transitions and a toxic workplace environment. So, for example, after King Nebuchadnezzar died, which happened in 562, then we know that several men tried to become the king, and all of them were killed. And then ultimately, King Nabonidus, he was king, and then he decided to retire, maybe to go play golf or something, and he appoints his son to be king. This is King Belshazzar. Now, here's the thing. Throughout all this transition, different bosses, different kings, this is part of that 40 years I was talking about, Daniel stayed faithful. And then there was a time under a different king, King Darius, when he had, Daniel that is, had co-workers that were out to get him. And for these co-workers, this wasn't that they wanted Daniel to get the pink slip. They wanted Daniel to get a one-way ticket to a lion's den. They were done with him. They wanted him exterminated and done with. And so they contrived this trickery of the king to say, hey, listen, I'm going to appeal to your pride and let's make a decree that on pain of death of the lion's den that nobody can pray to anything or anyone except for you, O King Darius. And Darius signed the decree, and all of a sudden Daniel, again, did not compromise, stayed faithful as a man of prayer to the Lord. Well, and you know how the rest of that story goes. The Lord was faithful through it all. You see, here's the thing. Daniel, he's a person just like you and me, and he's a great example of this. The reality is workplace challenges are challenging. They really are. We tend to spend a lot of time where we work, and our work matters. It's often, of course, how we provide for our family. And when we go through these types of challenging situations, I don't want to just diminish that it's not hard. I've been through my situations as well in life. But it also is a great chance and place to trust God. And it's a great way to continue to be diligent to say, I'm going to view my work as ministry. And so, again, we've talked about how God is pleased when we serve him in ministry. He's pleased when we view our work as ministry. And then finally, third principle, God is pleased with integrity. He's pleased with integrity. And here's the thing. Some of you listening, you love your job. Others of you, not so much. In fact, a survey that I had read said that 65% of Americans are unhappy in their job. For them, in other words, work is a have to. It's the old song, I owe, so off to work I go. That's where they're at. It's a plug my nose, go to work, do the job, get home, and that's just the daily grind. And so I understand that you listening, that might be where you're at as well. And it may be that you need to trust God for a new place to work. That certainly happens. And not only new places to work, sometimes people make full transitions into other fields. But in the meantime, and as long as the Lord has you in the workplace that you're in that meantime, my encouragement is that all the time that you're there, that you, again, view it as ministry and you are willing to be salt and light in that setting. Because he has you there and he wants to use you there. He wants your life to stand out like salt did as a preservative at the time this was written in the book of Matthew, which we'll read here in a moment, or light, which is it stands out in a dark world. And this is what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5. Starting in verse 13, he says, you, and that's plural, that's all of us. You are the salt of the earth. His people, his church, those who love Jesus, you are the salt of the earth. And it continues on in verse 14, you are the light of the world. And then in verse 16, he says this, so let your light shine before people that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven. And so here's the thing. In your character, this is like in your choices, in being ethical, for example, in your language, in your actions, following through and working with excellence. Make all of that above reproach. Now, I want to give an attitude evaluation, because even if you're in a workplace setting where maybe it's not appropriate or doesn't fit in terms of sharing your faith, very publicly and talking about Christ, boy, we can all do it with our actions at a minimum. And we should. That's what we've been talking about in this podcast episode. But an attitude evaluation, I want to ask you 3 questions. Number 1, are you a complainer or a problem solver? There's a world of difference there. It is easy to find complainers. It's not as easy to find problem solvers. So which one mostly describes you? Here's a second question. Does your attitude about your job shine bright? In other words, even if you don't love your job, because you love Christ, you can be excellent in your job, and that attitude should come forth. And people should be able to see that. Or how about this question, my final question for you. Are you a team player or are you difficult to work with? Remember, the people that the Lord has put you around in your workplace setting, and it's true for any setting, that's not an accident. You have an opportunity with those people. And so are you a team player or are you difficult to work with? And so I guess overall, I'd just like to ask you to reflect on your 9 to 5, whatever that might be. Your 9 to 5 might be at home and with the kids and homeschooling. Your 9 to 5 might be in a traditional workplace. I don't know what it is for you, but I would encourage you to reflect on that part of your life. Is there any part of this area that you would concede does not bring the Lord pleasure? Are there any changes in your 9 to 5 that you need to make in order to how you live your 9 to 5? We all have one, but how we live it is important. My encouragement in this is don't separate your faith from your 9 to 5. You see, the Lord, He needs to be a part of all of your life. And when we compartmentalize them, or we say that Lord, you can have my Sunday mornings, but my Monday, that's my work. That's what I do there. And it's different. That's really not an accurate picture of what it looks like to follow Christ. And so again, is that idea of don't separate Christ from this place. Bring Jesus with you to your work. Glorify Him in your work. Make Him your primary focus in your work. Make your work worship of Christ. Honor Him in the work that you do. And as you do, He will bless and honor you and lead your life. And so there might be some places where, again, you might want to make some changes. And maybe it's a workplace change. But until that happens, I'm really talking about we would change in our workplace, and that we would be people, salt, light, a testimony, a worshiper, and that work would be a part of what it means to follow Christ for you and for me in every part of our lives. I hope this has given you something to think about, some encouragement as you go about your week. Until next time, thank you for listening, and God bless.